And necessarily a first pass is kind of a broad overview. Don't get into a whole lot of depth. Well, it'll probably be more depth than what most of you probably have seen before. But there'll be plenty of room for questions and plenty of room for subsequent investigations. So with that in mind, I want to begin. Has science made God obsolete? I am going to argue, of course, no, but I want to go further than that. I want to go a little bit further and say that science, recent advances in science are actually increasing the rational justification for the belief in God. Arthur Clarke, used to be one of my favorite sci-fi authors when I was in high school, said science can destroy religion by ignoring it as well as by disproving its tenets. And there's this idea that as science has advanced, it's actually disproven basic tenets of various religions. Now let's look at that just a little more carefully. In pre-Socratic Greece, that is the time of ancient Greece prior to Socrates and Aristotle, the gods were credited with everything. Every lightning bolt, every storm, every volcanic eruption, every tree, every rock. The gods did everything. There were no natural processes governed by laws of nature in the minds of the pre-Socratic Greeks. It was always the gods that were doing those sorts of things. But as time went on, we began to find that there are what appear to be laws of nature that appear to govern how space, time, matter, and energy interact. And began to explain things like volcanic eruptions and lightning bolts and rock rolling down a mountainside. And so as science advanced, we found ourselves less and less in need of these ancient Greek gods, or in other parts of the world, very similar sorts of gods that were doing everything in nature. Until, I would say, roughly the last half of the 20th century, last half of the 1900s, the pendulum may have swung to the extreme of where it once was in the opposite direction with the ancient Greeks. And by that I mean it was assumed by many that science would explain everything, that there were no need for any gods whatsoever. Now that's, unfortunately, a leap has been made from explaining away the roles of the ancient Greek gods or Roman gods to explaining all gods, and that's a bit of a non sequitur. What I want to look at tonight, and in discussions in philosophy, we primarily focus on this idea of a God that's all-powerful, all-knowing, and perfectly good, and that's going to the perfectly good bit we're going to look at more tomorrow when we discuss the problem of evil and the existence of God. But I want to look at the basic claims of Judeo-Christianity because they are remarkably different from the claims of the ancient Greeks, and these claims predate the ancient Greeks. So just by way of overview, you've probably had a chance to look at that. Let's look at the claims, the basic claims of Judeo-Christianity when it comes to God's role in nature. First of all, there is this idea that God is responsible for the origin of the cosmos itself, the origin of nature. And if you want to, the idea of nature can mean different things for different people. Essentially, many people would say, well, it's the universe, space-time, matter, and energy. Some people who hold maybe to an oscillating universe type of theory might say, well, that whole thing is nature. If you like the multiverse, or any one of the multiverse theories, the system of universes spawning other universes, that whole collection, that whole thing is physical reality. That is nature. And if any of you read Hawking's latest book, Grand Design, Hawking Maloney's latest book, Grand Design, they postulate an ultimate M-theory system out of which all the other universes are spawned. And if that's what you like, we'll call that whole system nature. Physical reality, space-time, matter, and energy, laws of nature that may vary from universe to universe, but bottom line is, if it's physical, made of those things, we're going to call that nature. So this is the basic claim here, that God is responsible for the origin of nature itself. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and was void. Interesting statement. It seems to suggest the earth in the beginning wasn't even accreted, wasn't formed as a planet. No statement as to exactly when this happened, but there is clearly an indication there that God seems to be taking credit for the origin of the cosmos. There's another fascinating thing about the claims of ancient Judeo-Christianity, in that they believed in the laws of nature, that God had actually created laws of nature that actually governed the universe, radically different from most other ancient religions, and certainly the pre-Socratic Greeks. In the book of Job, God is talking with Job, and the book of Job is thought to be, by many scholars, to be the oldest book in the Old Testament. God says to Job, do you know the ordinances, or the Hebrew word is simply laws, of the heavens, or fix their rule over the earth? And so there's this idea that there's something greater than just the earth here. The earth, it might not even, it even suggests or calls into question this idea that the earth is the center of all the universe, because when God is speaking to Job, he seems to be implying there are laws here that I've put in place that govern the cosmos, and they also govern the earth. They fix the order of things. And these are referred to in a few different places in the Old Testament, so that everything can run according to these laws, radically different from the ancient Greeks. So I would include the laws of nature as part of nature itself. So you have space-time, matter, and energy in whatever form you like, if you're a multiverse person. And you also got the laws of nature in whatever form you like. If you're a fan of Hawking's, you've got the fundamental laws of nature in the M-theory system. And then you've got all the other laws of nature that you will have in the universes that come as a result. The next major thing that God is credited with is the origin of life in its major kinds, whatever those are. There is no explanation as to what a kind is. For example, God says, let the earth bring forth living creatures after their kind. No explanation as to how the earth is supposed to do this. But one thing we can draw from this is that clearly God is being held responsible, or taking responsibility or the credit, for the origin of life in all its major kinds. We'll come back to this idea of kinds later on, see what science has to say about that. But the question we're looking at is, how well has science done in explaining these things? And we'll start off with explaining the origin of nature itself, the origin of physical reality, space-time, matter, and energy, and the laws of nature that govern how these four things interact. So that's part two. Let's begin with part two. Interesting article. Just came out last week in New Scientist. For those of you who are not familiar with science journals, there are two journals that are broad in what they cover, that are very prestigious. One is Nature, one is New Scientist. Some people give the nod to New Scientist as the most prestigious interdisciplinary science journal. New Scientist is the British version, or the British competition. Stephen Hawking celebrated his birthday recently, and there was a meeting of cosmologists there. But there is this article basically summarizes a problem that has not only refused to go away, but has resurfaced with a vengeance, and that is that the universe, whatever type of universe you prefer to believe in, an oscillating one, a multiverse, whatever, there has to be a beginning to whatever theory you want. I was at a lecture given by Neil Turok at the University of Guelph on his version of the origin of the universe, M-brain theory, and it was very fascinating. But at the end of the lecture, he says, no, there are three problems. And the first problem is, how do you get this all started? And this is the problem that has surfaced, because it's a problem that really began with the Big Bang theory, because the Big Bang, when it first came out, was a problem in that it created a situation where you have a beginning, and when you have something that begins to exist, whatever begins to exist must be caused by something. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe itself must be caused by something. And so Stephen Hawking, he's had different positions in his life, but I believe at this point in his life he's an atheist. He states in this article, a point of creation would be a place where science broke down. One would have to appeal to religion and the hand of God. Now, these scientists, these cosmologists have arrived at this conclusion for scientific reasons. There are mathematical reasons why you cannot have, and logical reasons, why you cannot have an infinite regression of universes. We can get into that at the Q&A time, but we'll just leave it at this for the time being, for the sake of time, and you can ask me why we cannot have our infinite regression, but I just wanted to put this out. These are the two major contenders for ideas on how the universe began, in addition to the standard, this universe is a one-off deal. The top one is you have a sort of an oscillating type of situation there. It's basically a perpetual motion machine. And we always ought to be a little nervous when anybody tells us they have discovered a perpetual motion machine. The theory that it had no beginning, that it was hoped that there would be no beginning to this, but the same problem holds for this as it does for any machine that is a contender for a perpetual motion machine, and that is that entropy increases with each rebound. They explain that a little bit here. But each universe becomes increasingly disordered, and you work your way forward, and you will have perfect disorder. We're obviously not there yet, so we cannot have had an infinite number of bounces yet. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is you will never get to this lecture tonight if you have to wait for an infinite number of universes to transpire before we get to this one. No matter how many transpire, you will always have an infinitely more number transpire before you get to this event tonight. And that's another way of looking at it, a logical way of looking at it. The other one was, let's take one of the most popular known ones now, I think, due to Hawking's notoriety, is M-theory system, 11-dimensional M-theory system. You have this fundamental system here with fundamental laws of nature, and it spawns, I think, up to 10 to 500 different types of universes. But that one also has a time component to it, and therefore necessarily it has a beginning as well. And so basically all of these theories which were put forward in an effort to avoid having an ultimate beginning to all things have themselves an ultimate beginning, and we've accomplished absolutely nothing as far as avoiding this philosophical problem of having an origin to the universe. So, why did Hawking say that if there is an ultimate beginning for physical reality to nature itself, where nature can be whatever you like up there as far as multiverses, oscillating systems, whatever, if there is an ultimate beginning, then science breaks down and the hand of God starts moving in. Why would he say that? Let's work this. There's actually a very good logical reason why that occurs. But in order to appreciate that reason, I want to refresh your memories on something called the circular fallacy. The circular fallacy occurs when you assume your conclusion in your opening premises and then reason from those opening premises to prove your conclusion. You've proved nothing. You've already assumed that conclusion in your opening premise, and that's a logical fallacy. With that in mind, we have a problem. Trying to come up with a natural explanation for nature. You cannot assume the existence of natural processes so you can come up with a natural explanation as to how natural processes came into existence. That would be a circular fallacy. You cannot assume the existence of nature in order to come up with a natural explanation as to how nature came into existence. That would be a circular fallacy. That is a logical fallacy. And one of the fundamental aspects of our reasoning that underlies science, it underlies mathematics, is logic itself. This principle of non-contradiction, certain fallacies that a lot of you probably studied in logic. When you run into something that requires a logical fallacy, that becomes logically impossible. That's false.